So just to set the scene, this is meant to be a roundtable style conversation. The way we go about our webinars is it's very interactive. And the whole idea is a platform for everybody to ask questions. You may do so by coming up to the front to ask your questions directly. You could send your questions in via chat, via WhatsApp, via the website, whichever way you can, but do not call us to ask questions because it's quite disruptive. I've had times when people call me to ask questions and I'm like, no, I am on the call right now. So please bear that in mind. I would also plead with everyone to ensure their lines are mute as well. This way you don't interrupt us as well, because what we try not to do is, again, it's meant to be interactive. So at any time you may ask your questions. You're more than welcome to have your video cameras on as well so we can get to see you if you're comfortable with that. So we're just admitting quite a few. There's quite a few people in the waiting room, so please bear with us. We should have perhaps made this automatic entry, but I think we prefer everyone waiting in the lobby. That way we get ourselves ready for the session. So welcome everyone. I can see Dan is in the house. Kemi, the admin, is also in the house. I'll just call a few names, or some people have dropped out again. Apologies, technical issues, I'm sure. But the likes of Ian, Alexandra, Nkape, Lila, Sharon, hello everyone, welcome to the call. So I guess just a few more minutes and we kick things off. I'll go on mute. Kemi, you may want to just sort of say hello to everyone and then we kick things off in 5 minutes.
Okay. I'm just trying to admit more people. Okay, good morning, everyone. Shay and Daniel, thanks for joining the webinar. Thanks to all the people connected to this session. It's nice to meet you all. I'll just wait for a few more minutes, then I admit other people. People are still trying to join. So let's say we start 11:05. What do you think, Shay?
Yeah, I think that's a good shout. We start 11:05. It's literally, I'm getting so much notifications on here. It's quite insane. So apologies. It's a little bit distracting, but people are joining on.
Yeah.
Let's see. So I must say, what I love about Zoom in this day and age is the fact that we have people across different countries joining in. So I know for us, the team right now, we have Kemi is based in Portugal right now. Dan is in the Middle East. And obviously I'm in the UK right now. And I'm sure a number of you are spread all over the world. So it should be a very interesting session. And what I like to get out of these sessions is diverse perspectives on challenges we're facing in the industry. So it should be very interesting. So in a couple of seconds, we'll kick things off and then we just set the ball rolling. Feel free to share the link with your friends and colleagues to join as well.
Okay, let's get started with our webinar.
Perfect.
Yeah, so I personally would love to discover the exciting session our panelists have prepared for us. Please remember, as she said, you can share your questions, your opinions, your comments using the chat and the question and answer button. So let's get to the introductions. Shale is an accomplished entrepreneur and a seasoned professional with extensive experience in business strategy formulation, and project and program management. He is currently serving as the Chief Executive Officer of Oclas Group, a global organization that provides professional services to businesses, governments, and NGOs in the energy, oil and gas, and utilities industry. With a strong educational background, she holds an executive MBA in international oil and gas, a master's in marketing management, and a honors degree B-Engine, CS engineering in computer system engineering. He has a wealth of knowledge and expertise in areas such as process optimization, business strategy, market analysis, and project management. She is passionate about helping companies achieve their full potential and is dedicated to providing tailor-made solutions that meet their unique needs. His commitment to excellence and results-driven approach has enabled him to deliver measurable success for businesses of all sizes. As a sought-after speaker and industry thought leader, Shay's expertise and insights have helped many businesses stay ahead of the curve in today's rapidly changing business landscape. Welcome, Shay. Our next panelist is Daniel. Daniel Kirby is the CEO of Sea Horizon Offshore Marine Services, a company committed to servicing multinational companies and delivering excellence of global services. Coming from a family with long-standing success within the sector, Daniel has strong foundation and a deep understanding of numerous aspects of maritime and offshore operations, and has been featured in industry publications as an expert in his field. Having studied global business at the Harvard Business School and economics and business management at York and Rice University, respectively, Daniel has been leading the third generation family business from a very young age, with great success, growing its international outreach. He is a firm believer of building and sustaining family-like relationships with clients and business partners, while with entrepreneurism at its core. Passionate about youth empowerment, Daniel is an active member of Young Ship. Young Ship is a UAE non-profit organization which aims at empowering the youth in maritime, as he very much enjoys inspiring and supporting the new generation entering the industry at every given moment. Additionally, he has also been appointed as the Sea Trade Maritime Club Ambassador to Qatar, as he aims to promote the platform and attract the industry leaders in the region. Welcome, Daniel.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Sorry, I was. Thank you for having me.
I must say the introduction sometimes can be a little bit, oh wow, is that me? Is this really what's happening?
I was quite impressed. I was like, I did this.
Yeah. Well, Dan, I want to thank you first and foremost for joining this session. I know you have a very busy schedule and you made time to sort of join us. And again, apologies, we heard about what happened last week, because this session was meant to be last week, but we had to push it by a week. And despite the difficult times you're going through, you were still able to make it on this call. So we really, really appreciate it. And thank you very much. And again, we all send our condolences to the family as well.
No, thank you. Thank you so much for that. Thank you. Your words are very helpful in these times, and your support as well. Thank you so much, Shay.
No, thank you, Dan. Kemi, thank you for the introduction. So I think what I could do is I'll take things up from here. If I am going off track, please feel free to bring me back on track. Help us manage the time if we exceed the timeline as well.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Yes,
perfect, Kemi. Thank you. So Dan, again, pleasure. We met, I believe it was around a year ago in Qatar, and we did get on. And here we are today having a session where we're discussing. Sorry, could you mute? Yeah. So Kemi, please as well mute anyone that might be speaking so we don't get interrupted. Unless you have a question, then you could sort of raise your hands. So yes, in Qatar last year, it was very insightful. We learned so much. And then, of course, I got to know about your company, what you do, and how significant the role you play in the energy space is. So in terms of today's topic, it's really around uncovering the future of energy, are hydrocarbons enough? So in other words, I think we use hydrocarbon as we're trying to be a lot more green and a lot more sort of alluding towards sustainability, but it's technically oil and gas to a certain extent, but there's a lot more to it. But before I deep dive into that, I think it'll be worthwhile giving an introduction around what we think hydrocarbons are. That way, everybody is on the same page, and then we take things up from there. So obviously, hydrocarbons in oil and gas speak are literally organic compounds, that consist entirely of hydrogen and carbon atoms. They are primarily, and the core behind this, the primary, the core of what that is more or less fossil fuels, which are things such as coal, petroleum, natural gas, and these have been the primary source of energy for the human society. So what that means is hydrocarbons has literally been the core for all energy-related activities, be it electricity and so on and so forth. Now, obviously, things are changing with the concept of sustainability, green energy, and so on and so on and so forth. Now, again, this goes back to millions of years ago, you know, when plants and animals, dinosaurs, for those of you who believe in them, I do as well, but, you know, that's where it comes from. You know, they were sort of, you know, millions of years ago decomposed, and then that's where the whole oil thing came from, buried with obviously sediments of rocks, and over time, you know, heat and pressure sort of created this hydrocarbons, which is what we have today. Now, the reason why hydrocarbons have been a prime source of energy is that it contains a large amount of stored energy in the form of chemical bonds. You know, that's, of course, between your hydrogen and the carbon atoms. And then, of course, when buried and then the energy is released into the atmosphere, it forms heat, which can then be used to generate the likes of things like electricity and power engines. So that's basically the core. This is not meant to be a very technical conversation because we try to make this very relatable and sort of tap across the board. But for those of you students, particularly because we have a few students in the house as well, you know, that's basically where we're sort of, that's why we sort of give this, should I say, hydrocarbon 101. So Dan, what's your take on that? You know, I know you do a lot in the maritime space. You know, hydrogens, hydrocarbons. What's your take? You know, what are you noticing in the maritime space, and how is the industry shifting towards sustainability? You know, if at all, to be quite frank with you, you know, has there been a demand for LNG, liquefied natural gas? You know, is that on the increase? Would you say there's a shortfall in the hydrocarbons demand because we're all trying to move towards sustainability? So, in other words, do you notice a dip in demand for hydrocarbons and the rise in sustainable energy? Is that happening? I mean, it might be a very obvious answer, but I'd love to hear your take on this.
Thank you for that. You know, I mean, like you said, the hydrocarbons and the marine industry in specific is very simple. Whether we transport hydrocarbons or are we using hydrocarbons for the vessels that are moving the cargo and transporting the cargo. Currently, in the marine industry, we have a lot of, I don't want to call it a trial and error situation, but every specific sector in the marine industry is trying to move away from hydrocarbons, but we don't know what the future fuel is, right? So when we talk about the demand of hydrocarbons dropping, I feel like maybe the willingness to explore alternative fuels is increasing. The demand of hydrocarbons can't really decrease because, I mean, especially with what's going on in the world, we're pretty heavily reliant globally on hydrocarbons still. But I think that in the marine industry in specific, you know, every year we're discussing new types of fuel that is being tested and trialed in the maritime industry for how we are going to power our vessels. For example, some things currently, the hottest topic is LNG. So that's why we see the increase of demand in LNG for vessels. But it's not just LNG because, you know, as before we got on, we were talking about how some of the big container ship companies have already started ordering alternative fuel vessels such as methanol fuel vessels. You know, there's a company in Norway in our specific sector, in the OSV sector, that just finished building a platform supply vessel that is fully ammonia powered.
Wow.
Obviously the goal would be electric, but are we there? Definitely not. Will we be there? Hopefully in our lifetime. But I think right now the one thing that we can rely on for sure when it comes to an alternative to hydrocarbon is LNG. That's the one that we can see mostly. So yes, the demand of LNG is definitely increasing for that.
Wow, that's actually very interesting. You know, I can imagine a fully electric sort of ship, you know, and these are huge cargo sort of ships, right? So it's not like electric cars. And you can imagine, because, I mean, we have an electric car here and we struggle with the whole range, the whole battery charging times and so many other factors. So, I mean, you can imagine what those ships would be like, assuming they're all made with electricity or other alternatives. But I think it's also interesting because, you know, how sustainable is sustainability, if you know what I mean, from a shipping's perspective, you know, and what you've touched on sort of touches on nicely into the next thing I want us to talk about, which is around technology. You know, obviously technology plays a significant role in business, more or less, and what businesses do. What role will sort of advancements in technology play in shaping the future of energy? What role would technology play in that sense? And how might these advancements impact the visibility of hydrocarbons as an energy source, particularly in the maritime logistics space? What's your take on that, Dan? Feel free to ask me questions as well. I don't want to do
no, of course. I'm here to answer. No, one word that gets floated around a lot in our industry specifically is digitization. Now, I've heard it so many times and I still struggle to say it properly, but digitization is something that's all over the industry. It supports the enhancement of digitization is what supports the marine industry. It's one thing to have a fuel efficient vessel. It's another thing to have an alternative fuel. But there's also technology that can support you to be more sustainable. For example, there is technology currently where we can manage the engine power from onshore. So while my technical and operations director is sitting in his desk, he can restrict the engine power so the captain isn't overriding the engine, burning fuel. We also have companies that we mentioned earlier in America, a company more specifically called Fuel Tracks, which is being very heavily promoted in the industry. And that uses a lot of technology. It uses a satellite system that any moment, any day, I can grab my phone or open up the application and see how much fuel my vessel is burning. Whatever fuel that my vessel is storing, I can see at today it's going this speed and it's burning this much fuel. Why is it burning this much fuel when it's going this little speed, right? Like it's not just it's not just the alternative fuel that's going to save us for a sustainable future. It's also how we treat it, how we react to it, and how the operation side is. But one thing that in our industry in specific is coming more and more recent is that we're gaining more control and power onshore as offshore. So for example, the office employees are gaining more power than the captain on the vessel. Before it's kind of like blind trust. You have your captain on the vessel and you're hoping that he's managing the vessel properly and fuel. But now we have, through technological advances, we have opportunities to be able to manage our own vessel from here and know the day-to-day operations through PMS systems, through daily reports and all these things. So yes, technology, for every industry is going to be great.
Absolutely, Dan. And I think you've touched on a very important point there. And this is where, obviously at Oakless Consulting, we specialize in obviously optimization of businesses. And you're very correct. There's room for technology to help enhance the current activities, rather than waiting for this big time solution to come around sustainability. There are proactive steps we can all take as businesses or as individuals to help sort of optimize what we currently have and sort of drive that agenda around sustainability. You're very correct. I love what you said around the captains. Yes, they are the captains, but they're actually supported by the people in the office based on informed decisions, thanks to data analytics, which is, where you have things like digital technology sort of playing a key role in terms of advanced data analytics, with this concept of AI that's sort of trending now, machine learning algorithms, how is this, we've traveled this route several times. What's the most optimized way to travel? What way can we go to cut down on fuel economy or to improve fuel economy to avoid delays and so on and so forth? Obviously, Internet of Things, IoT, and so on and so forth. So it's very, very interesting. And I think for me here, businesses and individuals in the sector or whatever sectors you might be in, they are proactive steps you can currently take to sort of start working that journey. You don't necessarily need to wait for the solution to come before you begin to sort of implement the necessary change. Start getting into the good habits, start reviewing your current processes, start optimizing your processes, and so on. So very, very, very valid point, Dan. Just to throw out a few other technology advances as well, you have things like exploration technology, obviously production technology, that's like technologies used in the extraction of the actual hydrocarbons and so on and so forth. processing technology as well, and of course, transportation technology, like we've spoken about, and of course, environmental technology, obviously that helps in minimizing the environmental damage and so on and so forth. And of course, digital technology, like I said. So those are 6 core avenues of technology advancements I would sort of mention here. So if we move over to the next, at this point, I think I'll take a step back and just ask the audience, if anyone has any questions, any comments, you're more than welcome to raise your hands, or just sort of unmute your mic and ask the question. We'll just give everyone a minute to quickly do that before we go into the next session, which begins to get very interesting as well. I think everyone's pretty quiet.
There is no questions at this point.
No questions at this point. Okay,
that means we're not exciting enough. What's going on?
This is the problem. I wish I could see people. I'll literally point and ask questions. Okay, I see someone unmuted their mic. Kanu, have you a question? And hello.
Yes, hello. Yes. Thank you very much. I have a question regarding because I work in the maritime sector, so I'm trying to understand where is this going. Like, there's a lot of talk about sustainability right now, and as you mentioned earlier, LNG is like should I say, the next best thing to what we have currently on ground. Right, many companies are going to move over to LNG, but what I want to ask is regarding other fuels such as like hydrogen and ammonia, for example. How sustainable would it be to also include these other fuels? Because some of these fuels are very expensive, cost-wise. For shipping companies, for example, and cost plays a very big role in deciding the type of fuels that will be used on board. So what, in your opinion, do you see any progression towards other types of fuels, such as hydrogen and ammonia, or towards these more greener fuels, for example, towards these greener fuels?
I actually really like that question. I'm really glad, because to be honest with you, I've been asking the same question myself. Yes, when it comes to alternative fuels, we can say that LNG is the future, but I do think, and a lot of people in the industry could probably agree, is that LNG is a transition fuel. You look at it as Qatar Energy, who is promoting LNG and focusing on LNG a lot. It's in their slogan, your energy transition partner. I think that LNG is the short-term idea, but I do see the long-term future is hydrogen. Now, this is what the issue is, because to implement hydrogen on your vessel today and to have a hydrogen-fueled vessel is expensive, because transporting hydrogen is not easy, and having hydrogen bunkering facilities is not easy. So this is where we know the idea of. There's no surprises coming on what the future fuel would be, whether it's ammonia, hydrogen. Yes, we're going to have a short, maybe 10 years of LNG, which I think LNG is the next step, but is it the final step? Well, the final step ideally would actually be electric. But to be able to put all vessels, maybe ocean-going vessels, to actually address your question more directly, can I know what part of the marine industry you're in? Are you in ocean-going vessels or offshore?
No, on ocean-going vessels.
Okay.
Cleaner ships.
So for example, ocean-going vessels I think have more of a faster turnaround when it comes to alternative fuels, right? Because it's from point A to point B, whereas offshore vessels, we use the vessels as that's our bread and butter. That has to work around the oil rig, and it needs a lot of power. So that's where I think we're far away from electric. We have a lot of diesel electric engine vessels, but we're not fully electric yet. But when it comes to the future fuel itself, I think I would like to say personally it's going to be hydrogen, just because of all the tests and trials that have been done for hydrogen and the proof of concept, but again, it's expensive. As ship owners, it's very, every ship owner looks commercial, looks at how to cut costs. So to convince a ship owner to transfer to hydrogen and build hydrogen today is difficult. But that's why a lot of companies and a lot of governments want to promote alternative fuels, and we touched on it later on, right? About the government aspect of it, but in reality, we need incentives. We need incentives. We all want to have an alternative fuel, but we need incentives to actually produce vessels and own vessels and operate vessels with an alternative fuel, because it's expensive. Today, it's expensive because we don't know what's going to happen in the future. In the future, there'll be, when oil and gas was first implemented, and we were running diesel vessels or MGO powered vessels. At that time, that first one was introduced was probably expensive as well, right? So incentives are needed. But to more specifically answer your question, I think hydrogen, in my personal opinion, but there's everyday changes.
No, yeah, Dan, really good answer. Kano, I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, sure, no worries. I mean, again, if you have more questions, feel free to just raise your hand, unmute yourself, and go ahead and ask. And thanks for asking, because it helps reassure us that people are listening as well. So thanks for that. Just to throw out a few things, obviously with regards to this whole concept around alternative maritime fuels, should I say. So it says here, the International Maritime Organization has set targets for reducing greenhouse emissions from ships. And some countries have established emission control areas, ECAs, where ships must have cleaner fuels such as LNG. Now, why that's very interesting is the next topic we'll be discussing, which is around government and policymakers, because they are ultimately the ones that should sort of push for this. Just to put some sort of context in place for those of us who might not be too familiar with what hydrogen is from a fuel perspective and what ammonia is. Hydrogen typically is zero emissions, more or less. That's why it's highly sought after. It's zero emissions. However, it's highly capital intensive. However, the production and storage of hydrogen can be expensive and challenging. And there are currently a few hydrogen fueling infrastructure and supply chains in place. So that's very interesting. And then ammonia, on the other hand, is a very, very sensitive and toxic sort of fuel. So obviously there has to be a lot of caution with handling, and of course, there's a lot of technological and regulatory challenges to sort of address, how it's utilized. So this is where it's very, very sensitive, although a very good source of energy. And then for those of you who might be wondering, okay, what companies are actually doing this? So I know in Japan, for instance, there's a company called the Kawasaki Heavy Industries. It's a Japanese company, like I mentioned. They have developed a hydrogen-fueled marine engine, and it's currently conducting tests of engine in collaboration with several shipping companies. Man Energy Solutions is another one. It's a German company, and they've actually developed a dual engine, which is running on both ammonia and diesel fuel, which is pretty interesting. And they're currently working on a sort of ammonia engine as well. And then there's a few other companies. There's NYK Line, which is again a Japanese company. And then going to Norwegia, so there's a company called Equinor. It's a Norwegian energy company, and is involved in several projects related to production and use of hydrogen as a fuel. So yes, there's a lot of things happening in that space, but I think this is more long-term. So for us to get there, and sort of coming back to the next question, this is where the government has to play a significant role around the regulation and the policy around ensuring businesses sort of align to this long-term vision. And of course, possibly things around incentives and various tax benefits and whatnot. So Daniel, there has, obviously it's been a very informative session, and obviously we've had some questions. We had a question from the audience. I haven't looked at my phone yet to see if there's any WhatsApp message. Kemi, please just have a look if there's any questions on all the other platforms. So moving on now, how can the government, support businesses like yours, Dan? You know, I know you're currently, your headquarters is in Qatar. You do a lot from Dubai. You're an international business. You ship products around. You know, how can the government make your life a lot easier? You know, then also looking at the current climate, you know, we have the situation in Russia, you know, how has that impacted your business? You know, has it created more opportunity? Has it created more visibility? Has it taken out some competitors from the market? You know, so it'll be interesting to hear your thoughts on this, you know. So over to you.
I mean, right before I answer that question, yes, you did mention the IMO fuel regulations for 2030, which I was supposed to bring up when I was answering your question, the previous question. Is yes, that's one thing about the alternative fuels is what are we going to do? Because we have 7 years to make a decision and to meet the fuel requirements of IMO before vessel owners get penalized. Now, that's a big question. But to answer the more specific question of what you asked about government's involvement in how they can support alternative fuels is, like I've said, is we need incentives, right? To implement alternative fuels and to meet the 2030 regulations for IMO is expensive. And right now, after a lot of the marine industry, I mean, cargo ships had a wonderful 3 years during Corona. Now that things have stabilized. Right now, currently, when it comes to the marine industry, we have an upward trend for the offshore sector. So we need incentives. A lot of the past 5 years, a lot of marine companies are recovering. So we just spent all these years recovering commercially, and now we have to spend more money to meet alternative fuels. And of course, I mean, nobody is going to sit there and tell you that alternative fuels is not the way to go, because it is the way to go. We want to go, but we have to find an economical solution to be able to switch it. Because again, like I said, it's we have the options there, but right now it's very expensive to use those fuels. Now, how I'm seeing government support is, for example, in Qatar, we're given incentives. So in Qatar, if I present a vessel that has an alternative fuel or a dual fuel system, or if I give a plan of fuel sustainability in my project, whether it's to any of the national oil companies or whether it's to any government entity, I immediately get offered double the length of the contract that they originally want. So for example, Qatar Energy will release a contract for 5 years. But if I put in my proposal for the 5-year contract that I'm going to do this and I'm actually do it, it immediately goes to 10 years. So that's a way of incentivizing me as the ship owner that, you know what, let me make that investment. Let me put that money together. Let me do it so we can have a longer contract, because you'll make it back. You're guaranteed 10 years of a fixed rate, which is a good opportunity. So yes, that is how I think policymakers and governments can support ship owners. Now, how it can be done when it comes to ocean-going vessels and cargo ships, I think that's with the support of the International Marine Organization. They will have to, or class notations, you know, for things like, you know, even Saudi Aramco in Saudi Arabia has been presenting with allowing older vessels to call to port if you have a fuel alternative, if you install some sort of fuel alternative mechanism. So things like this that the region is doing support, because right now, because especially of what's going on in Russia, we are very heavily reliant on hydrocarbons because the world needs it, right?
That is very, very interesting and insightful, and I do like the way Qatar supports. I mean, doubling your contract length, that is a fantastic one, you know. And I think this is little practices government institutions need to learn from, like the government needs to sort of learn from. I really like that model. I've never heard of that before, so I'm completely blown away. And I'll be using that as a recommendation for any sustainable additions sort of throughout that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's see. The next question here is, what are the potential economic impacts of shifting away from hydrocarbons, both for maritime energy industry and for society as a whole? I know we've touched on that, but I'm just sort of you're just sort of going through it again. Any thoughts around that, or?
I mean, as we've touched on it, the environmental impacts are there. You know, I was reading an article the other day that said that 7 million people a year die from natural causes of air pollution. So, you know, for alternative fuels, we all know that it's a no-brainer that the first step is it's better for the environment. Now, economic impacts, implementing alternative fuels creates jobs, right? When it comes to, you know, by 2030, I read a report from the US that we will, right now, there's probably 12 million, the IREA, the International Renewable Energy Association, predicted that there is currently 12 million employees in the industry, and by 2030, there'll be 50 million employees in the industry worldwide. So, you know, it's so renewable energy it creates jobs, and to be honest, it's cheaper for the consumers. You know, implementing renewable energy is much cheaper as a consumer, where it's not cheaper for the ones implementing it on their vessels, but it's cheaper as a consumer when I'm buying products from the grocery store, you know, from the shop. It's cheaper. So that's why I think the environmental and economic factors are a big plus. Now, this is for the consumer part, like I said, economic factors when it comes to implementing renewable energy. But I think we'll get there. I think now in 2023, when we're talking about it, we think it's expensive. But I think by the next 5 years, there will be ways of making it more attainable and economical to implement alternative fuels.
Oh, fantastic, Dan. That's actually a good question. So we're a good answer, rather. So we're down to the last two questions, and we're a little bit pressed for time, but we might be able to sort of sort of breeze through. But because what we tend to do is we leave the last 15 to 10 minutes for Q&A. But let's see now. So how do you see the shift impacting countries heavily dependent on hydrocarbons? Is it fair that those countries are going to have to suffer with this new concept of sustainable energy? You know, so in other words, countries that have been heavily sort of dependent on oil and gas as their source of GDP or whatever the case might be, you know, they would suffer significantly on this. So what are your takes on this? You know, from my own perspective, I think, you know, this is why, as a business person, should I say, you diversify your offerings as a country, and you really don't need to be dependent on one thing. Or if anything, how can you sort of adapt other models? You know, I know Nigeria, to be precise, you know, obviously is a very heavily dependent on the energy sector. However, there's a lot of gas flaring, and this gas can be converted, you know, with the concept of LNG, you know. So what sort of initiatives is the government taking sort of make that a proactive sort of like a policy, should I say, within the country? So what are your takes on that, you know?
I mean, you know, there's a lot of, I mean, regionally, I can say, when it comes to West Africa, I'm not too familiar, but regionally, I'm seeing more and more the countries that are heavily dependent on hydrocarbons are making the shift, right? Mm-hmm. So when I think it was about 5 years ago when Qatar Energy Qatar as a country exited OPEC, being such a high oil and hydrocarbon producer, everyone was, you know, all the other OPEC plus nations were, you know, question marks, but they exited OPEC to focus on the LNG transition. You know, now more than ever, Qatar is going to have the largest LNG expansion in the world, doubling their LNG production from 77 million tons per annum to 125 million tons per annum. And that was a topic that was heavily discussed in the last time we saw each other at the Bloomberg Economic Forum in Doha. So even Saudi Arabia has Aramco has now a alternative fuel division, you know, hydrocarbon and hydrocarbon free division, and ADNOC, Abu Dhabi National Oil Company. So it's less about countries, you know, that are heavily reliant doing kind of being shied away. It's more about adapting, right? And when we talk about hydrogen as a fuel, there's many ways of taking hydrocarbons like oil and gas and transferring them to hydrogen. So we have a company in Canada that we recently gotten close to, and that's what they're in the process of doing. So they have these transfuges actually that takes the oil and runs it through the transfuge and converts it to hydrogen.
That's interesting.
So it's literally a transition. So I mean, you know, that's a step. That's a start. So we still do need hydrocarbons in the near term, and for the transition. So I think, but again, like you would be able to tell me more about Europe and West Africa, to be honest, not because that's what I'm seeing happening in North America and the Middle East. But I think that will be the way moving forward. It's about adapting.
This is true. Yeah, no, I completely agree with you, you know, and I'll add to that as well, diversifying, you know, this is where, again, the whole concept of other energy sources play a key role. So I know the UK and Europe particularly, they're quite big on other energy sources, wind energy, solar energy, and so on. Obviously, hydrogen is another good one. Hydro energy as well is another key one that is being looked at as well. That is good, more or less. So very valid points, and I completely agree with you on that one. I'm thinking we move on to the next question now, or actually what I'll do is I would throw out the audience, you all get your questions ready because we'll be asking questions in the next few minutes. But I will just sort of ask the next question, which we would use to sort of conclude the session, which is, you know, around what role can individuals play in promoting a more sustainable energy future, and what actions can be taken to reduce your own reliance, should I say, on hydrocarbons. Now, again, at the end of the day, you know, I find in society we're very quick at pointing fingers, and this is where I like what we do as a company, you know, is less blame game, but more solutions, you know. Okay, yes, we're aware of this challenge. How can we fix it? You know, call a spade, and work closely with the clients to help resolve these challenges. So, this is the situation we're in. Yes, we know the environment is going through a lot. You know, there's a lot of talk of net zero, you know, but yet you don't necessarily see the policies being properly implemented by the government. You know, you don't see the regulations being as effective. And of course, you don't see how it benefits individuals to sort of partake or join this journey. This is why I'm going to make reference to what Dan said around extending the length of any contract you get, if you're actually able to implement some elements of sustainability in it. So, before I throw it out to you guys, and of course, Dan, please, I'll pass it to you before I conclude. But you know, in terms of roles, you know, what we can all do, you know, the first one is energy sort of conservation. You know, that's the little we can do. You know, conserving energy is the simplest and most effective way for individuals to reduce their carbon footprint. So if you drive a Ferrari, maybe drive a Prius. I mean, you know, I'm not, you know, that's a bad example, but in other words, cut down your carbon footprint more or less. This can be sort of implemented through best practices, like even in your homes, switching off your lights, you know, cutting down on unnecessary energy wastes, and of course, supporting renewable energy organizations out there, you know, support the development and adopt such practices as well. You know, obviously, be an advocacy and political actions need to be taking place to help boost that initiative. Education and awareness, I find we're lacking in that, particularly in Europe, should I say, where, yes, you're stressing so much around sustainability, but why? People are not understanding why they should. So I think there's that element missing, you know, around the education and awareness side of things. And of course, make a lot more sustainable choices. You know, if you want to take steps, think about things from a sustainable standpoint as well, not just monetary wise as well. So those are some of the points I'll throw out there. Dan, any thoughts on that?
I mean, to end it on a much lighter note, I think talking about what choices we can make as individuals to support renewable energy and sustainable energy is very similar to wanting to get in shape and going on a diet. We can easily say that, you know, don't eat carbs, you know, eat healthy, but everyone wants to drive a Ferrari. Everyone, you know, no one wants to. If you have the money, you drive a Ferrari. But no, seriously speaking, it's just in my opinion, it starts with policymakers. It starts with government. You know, you have to implement something. Like Like it's very easy for us to say, okay, we want cleaner energy, but then we don't really realize that what the decisions we make in life, how much energy is being consumed. Like you said, the lights, the gas fixtures, the types of lights we use in our homes. It's cold, turn on the heat, things like this we don't know. So it's up to governments and policymakers to A, give us incentives, B, educate us, and educate individuals on ways that you can save energy and things like that. It's not it right now with the resources we have possible. I don't think it's as easy as me and you sit here and speak about how to make it sustainable. It starts from the top. I think the last layer is consumers.
Very, very valid point. No, Dan, I think thank you for that. You really just sort of wrap it all nicely. Before I hand over to admin to sort of wrap the session up, I think we'll just throw it out to the audience. Any questions, any comments, any thoughts, anyone? We'll give everyone a few minutes. If you have any questions, just unmute your mic, and if you just want to have a conversation, now is a perfect time to do so. You can just introduce yourself, tell us what you do, and so on and so forth. So anybody in the audience who might be interested.
Yeah, hello.
Hi, Adewumi.
Hi, how you doing, everyone?
Hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
My name is Dayo Deomi. I work for EcoCity Projects. I was going to ask, what is our opinion on carbon capture and storage, and what's, if that is actually a viable solution in terms of reducing the carbon footprint and also allowing continuous production of hydrocarbon, for the future.
Your question is what's our opinion on it, or what is the future?
What's the future of it? Is it something you guys think is actually viable? And have you guys started practicing or implementing things like that?
I think it's very viable. Currently, we've actually been exploring ways as in our company ourselves to use carbon capture for fuel efficiency. I have a couple of friends that actually have a company that are taking they are using the mines, the mines in Africa, and capturing the carbon from that and selling it. And I think there's a future in it. It is very viable. And when in your last question, I think was how is hydrocarbons, the future of hydrocarbons? Will we need in the future? Was that?
That's interesting.
Yeah. I think my question was, how does that play in for the future of hydrocarbon, in the world? Because if carbon capture and CCS is viable, it means that we can actually continue. Well, from my understanding, we can actually continue producing hydrocarbon and also putting things in place in terms of the power plants and coal, so that we can make sure that there's a big reduction of the carbon footprint. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes, of course. No, I don't think that we'll ever get rid of hydrocarbons, right? We're speaking about ways of how alternative fuels can make things better. But yes, of course, carbon capture will reduce the effect of hydrocarbons in for fuel efficiency and also for environmentally issues. So yes, I do think an alternative for alternative fuels is the carbon capture. Now, the only thing is it's how much can you, is the output going to be as much as a sustainable fuel when you're doing carbon capture?
No, Dan, I completely agree with you there, and I thought I'll just throw in some comments around that point. I think for me, Dio, it's simply down to it's business at the end of the day. Most of these oil and gas companies are not just charities or people that just want to be the good guys. At the end of the day, it boils down to the figures as well. The concept of carbon capture is actually very capital intensive. And again, so touching on some of the points we mentioned, the technological front is not on par. The policy incentives are not necessarily there. And of course, the economic considerations are not necessarily in the best of interest to these businesses. So yes, the solution might be there, but it's not actually viable financially for a number of people to sort of go down that route. So this is why for me, it's again, it goes back to, how much research is being done, how much engineering is going on around the space, and developing a lot more efficient ways to sort of make this method of capturing and sort of transporting it and storing the carbon dioxide more efficient and safe and regulatorily compliant and so many other factors, so we're not yet there. But I think from my own perspective, ultimately, it's just not financially viable. And yes, it's true, it's a solution, but if the policies don't make it sort of favorable, then why should I or why should we, and let's use Nigeria as an example. That's why the gas flare. It's cheaper to, whereas we can actually compress this gas and have, we can use it for other factors. You can use it to even generate electricity, but it's being flared because the policies, the regulation, the government isn't going hard on them and so many other factors. So I hope that addresses your question. If not, please feel free to because it's a lovely conversation. We're now all very pressed for time. We literally got 7 minutes. We tried to keep this session within 45 minutes with 15 minutes for Q&A. But any more, sorry, Kemi, just any more questions from the audience? Any questions, comments? Or Kemi, if no one says anything, you take over. I'm going to mute my mic now.
Yeah, thank you, Shay. It was such an inspiring section. I really learned a lot. So hello again, everyone. I want to thank you all for attending this webinar and investing your time to learn from Shay and Daniel. I'll be sharing Shay's LinkedIn in the chat box. But then we'll also be sharing this recording via our website over a few days. Our website is www.oclasconsulting.com/blog. I'll also be putting the link to the survey form in the chat box. The survey form helps us track and help us to improve our focus for our other upcoming webinars. So let's keep in touch. We'll see you in the next section.
Yeah.
In our next event, sorry.
Yeah.
I'm trying to share the link now.
Okay, lovely. Thank you, Kemi. Whilst you're doing that, I just want to say a big thank you to everyone as well. Those of you that made time to join the session, thank you so much. And of course, Dan, our guest on the session, thank you very, very much. It's been extremely informative. I've learned so much. And I cannot wait to start pushing this agenda of extending the years. I just found that extremely mind-blowing as well, because it's incentive. But Dan, thank you so much. And again, our condolences for what happened. And we really appreciate you making time, despite the difficult situation you're going through in the family, to still come on our platform and educate us. It's been a pleasure. And I'm, of course, looking forward to meeting you. Hopefully, we'll bump into each other next month. I believe it is next month. I think it is.
Yeah, next month.
Yeah, next month. Yeah, no, it's been an absolute pleasure. And guys, this is Dan. Feel free to reach out to him on any of our platforms. You have access to him as well. Any questions you have can be passed across to him. And yeah, looking forward to meeting you all in the next session. So for those of you who don't know, it's all on the website. It's in the services or in the services section, I believe it is, where you have the where you book a session, you see the next talk, which is around unleashing your company's true potential, a collaborative race to success using strategy and data. So this is going to be a very much data-focused session, and we're bringing back AI to sort of drive the session as well. So what we try to do is we spice things up occasionally, where we just occasionally we use humans, like Kemi is helping us now as a human being, a real person. And then sometimes we use AI to drive the session, where you have AI, these are people designed with AI asking questions and sort of facilitating the session. So it might be a hybrid, and it's going to be a very interactive session because we're looking to move to a new platform to drive that session called Miro. So Miro is the Web 3.0 version of Zoom. So that's Zoom on super steroids. But yeah, so again, all information on our website. Thank you all so much. It's been a pleasure, everyone. And yeah, Kemi, over to you. You can end the call if you're happy to.
Yes, everyone. Thank you. Thank you for joining once again. Have a great week with the best energy. And we'll see you all soon.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much again for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye,
Daniel.
everyone. Thank you for joining.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.